a very short review of Stephen King's Misery, written in 1987, and it tells the story of a world famous author called Paul Sheldon. And Paul Sheldon, at the start of the novel, has a car crash which leads him to be in the care of his number one fan, Annie Wilkes. Now, when Annie realizes that in Sheldon's latest book, that he has killed her favorite character, she loses the plot, and he suddenly realizes that Annie actually is very, very mentally unstable and really has no bounds to what she will do in terms of inflicting harm upon him. And the story basically goes that Annie forces Paul to rewrite or write the next book in the series and bring back to life her favorite character who he killed off. And really, Paul knows that at the end of this, it's going to basically be Annie's basically going to kill both of them. So he's writing to stay alive, but he also knows by the time he finishes the book, that's the length of time he's got to escape, because at the end of it, she's going to read the book and then she's going to kill both of them. Now, ironically, Paul is actually in quite a bit of... he's in a bad situation at the very start of the novel, because the reason he kills off the character in his book series is because he is very sort of burnt out with writing. He feels he's an alcoholic, which leads him to having his car crash. So he's not in a very good place at the start of the novel, although he has just written a manuscript for a new book, which he thinks is his best book he's ever written. And yes, you will find out what happens in the story with that manuscript. But so he's not in the best situation or best place at the start of the book. And then obviously things just get much worse. Now, what I like about this book, I think the main strength of this book is characterization. So in the book, really, we get two characters. You get Paul and you get Annie. So Annie is the lady who has kidnapped Paul, taken him hostage, whatever what terms you want to use. Now, there's great character development throughout the story. Actually, Paul learns a lot from his imprisonment, and in a weird way, he does actually benefit, or he is rescued from certain vices that he has in his life. As a result of being kidnapped, he stops smoking. He writes more, and he learns a lot about himself and his sort of willpower to try and stay alive. Now, obviously, he goes through a lot of physical and emotional and mental torment in the book. He is the subject of many awful things that happen, and that's mainly because Annie is just completely insane. Now, it's very clear in the book, and you've got to remember this is in 87, so not a big sort of emphasis on mental illness, but Annie has got a severe personality disorder. I would argue, it's probably bipolar. 1 minute she is super, super sort of motherly and kind, and the next second she is completely psychotic and is attacking herself, is attacking Paul. She will go through stages where she will eat food that hasn't been cooked. She will just eat anything in like any combination, and she'll be in a sort of state of sort of like almost like a trance-like state. So she has this kind of personality where it's completely up and down and it's completely chaotic. And she also doesn't really see the real world as a world she wants to live in. The world that she is obsessed with and wants it to be is the world of the book, of the Misery books, which is why she's so distraught when she finds out that Paul has killed off her favourite character. Now, Annie does awful things, but what's great about his writing in this book is that Stephen is able to make us feel some sympathy for her, even though she is an awful person. She does awful things. Even Paul in the book feels sorry for her at certain parts. She's a very lonely figure. She's a very misunderstood figure. She's obviously very evil, but you can't help but think things could have been different for her if she wasn't so alone and she had some help with her mental illness. It's really strong and brilliant character writing. Um, and Paul is not a saint. He has got many issues in his life, and he has had many vices in his life. So through this whole ordeal in the story, he learns a lot about himself. He's also rescued from certain things for himself. Obviously, he's stuck with some very traumatic experiences, but he does learn a lot from himself, and he does become better in certain ways in his life, which is why it's brilliant character writing. One of the best things about this book is how everything feels so genuine. It feels like this situation could happen, and it probably, not to this extent, but it probably has happened in certain countries. People are tortured, people are kidnapped and held hostage, and everything in this book feels so genuine. There's a certain chapter, I won't go into it, but where Paul is begging Annie to spare him and not hurt him, and it is toe curling. You are on the edge of your seat. It feels like you are there, and it feels, you are reacting the same way Paul reacts. Like, you don't want this thing to happen, and it does happen. It is gruesome. It is hard to read at times, but it's also fantastic. And I really can't recommend this book higher. It's a fantastic horror book. It's only roughly about 300 pages long. And I would put it in my, to be honest, top 10 books I've read of all time. It's definitely by far the best Stephen King novel I've read. I've read some bad Stephen King, I've read some good Stephen King, and this one is definitely, in terms of characterization, the best that I've read. So I really recommend giving this a read if you've got a free week or so to have a read, especially over Halloween. So thank you for watching. Goodbye.